Hi, everybody, and welcome to episode 2 of the podcast Fenced In. You are with me, Ben, and Chris today, like you were last week, actually. And today is Chris's birthday, actually. So we're going to wish him a very happy birthday. Chris, give us a bit more about how your wonderful birthday's been and who you are, just so you can remind the listeners.
Oh, thank you. Today has been absolutely amazing. I've been surprised of so much, and it's been, I think, probably way better than it would have been if we weren't in lockdown, because it's made people make so much more effort, which has been amazing. So thank you to you, Ben, and everybody else that's wished me happy birthday. And I've got a brother that made me an amazing video, collage of videos and photos and all sorts. It was about 15 minutes long, but that really had me going. It was quite emotional. But
Amazing.
really, really, really very good. And yeah, I'm Chris, a foil fencer from London, currently in lockdown in Suffolk. Ben, tell us a bit about you.
Just to remind everybody, I'm Ben Peggs, and I am a long-time fencer. And Chris and I want to set this podcast up to kind of get some information out there to anybody really that is involved in fencing whilst in the lockdown. Hence the name Fenced In. So Chris and I work together. I actually am very fortunate to coach Chris. We've been working together for a little while now, and we wanted to kind of just put something out there really to help people that are in lockdown and want kind of new ideas or want to understand kind of what people like Chris and I are doing training wise and what we've seen online, and lots of different ideas. We are both pretty experienced, and we are loving some of the comments that came in a little while ago after episode 1, and so we're kind of really wanting to engage with you guys and find out what you want to hear, and what you want to kind of talk about or want us to talk about. So at the moment in time, we got some feedback that some people are obviously feeling quite down at the moment, quite demotivated, quite frustrated. Is it week 3, Chris, that we've been in lockdown?
Yeah, I think it's been about 3 weeks that we've been in lockdown in the UK. It's obviously been longer since fencing clubs have stopped. So I don't think I've fenced for about 4 weeks now, which is probably the longest time in a while. How long's it been for you?
Yeah, I was saying today, it does feel like the longest part of my career that I haven't fenced for, which is utterly bizarre. And I think what this episode is going to be about is psychology. And I think I texted you earlier on this week, didn't I? And I said that I was feeling quite demotivated, quite down, and just like almost. But it was one day when I felt a little bit lost. And I mean, have you kind of felt like that at all yourself?
Yeah, I haven't really felt down about anything, but I've definitely started to feel like fencing is missing from my life, and I'm doing a lot of work on fitness and home-based strength training. But the fencing specific stuff I'm finding quite hard to do because I don't have a target date. Whenever I've been away, whenever I've been based abroad, which actually has only been once, it was much easier to do that. Or over the summer, for example, when clubs shut down a bit and there are no competitions, you know what you're aiming for. You know that the satellite season is on, and you kind of know where the start date is and when you're going to taper and do things. But I found that with the fencing specific training, it's quite hard to give yourself specific kind of footwork goals or say, right, I'm going to do half an hour of this every day. I've actually put together a training program since we last spoke, partly based on yours, so that I have a bit more structure to my training and that I can
Oh yeah.
incorporate fencing specific exercises. But like I said, I'm finding it quite hard because
Has that
I
given
don't
you more direction though, like setting yourself a kind of like timetable?
I don't know about direction, but it's helped me spread out my training and make sure I hit certain targets a bit more.
Mm.
So something I'm doing now that I wasn't last week is that I'm aiming to do fencing and pad work on my dummy 2 to 3 times a week, and I'm doing agility sessions twice a week. But again, without knowing what you're aiming for, and without actually being able to fence, it feels very hard to do something in isolation without then putting it in context, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
completely. I
Because
think
we're
the other
doing
thing that's quite difficult is not having people around you to also like motivate you, push you, drive you, want to catch them, that kind of stuff. So certainly when you and I have lessons, you know, we kind of feed off each other, right? Or if you're a training session, you feed off of the people around you, and training in isolation, you kind of miss that kind of motivation from other people, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. After we've had a lesson, we usually fence as well, and that's quite an interesting dynamic. I mean, I might say they're mind games. There aren't necessarily mind games, but there are certain things you want to practice, but you think, well, I can't do that because he knows it's coming because we've been working on it. And also, you pull things out of the stops that I haven't seen. As you say, you know, you want to catch people, you want to try stuff, you want to fence hard, you want to have fun, you want to, you know, there's a lot going on. But as you say, by yourself, that's something that's quite hard to achieve. What do you think? And how have you got anybody near you? When you've been doing your workouts, have you found you've got people doing something similar, like kind of because you've got a communal garden, I think, where you are now?
Yeah, definitely. I think, like I mentioned earlier on, psychologically, it's been harder this week. It was kind of a bit new, this whole lockdown thing, when it first happened. It was like, oh, here's something different. Let's be imaginative. But come week 3, you start to feel like the imagination is running out, and it's starting to, like I put in last week's episode and I sent over to you. I did a training kind of diary, and I wanted to know what I was doing and timetable of each day, and it felt very good. It felt kind of purposeful. It felt like I had some direction. But after 3 weeks of doing that and training quite hard, it's kind of, okay, this is now tough because I'm not getting other stimulus. And like you just said, am I training anybody? Well, I'm very fortunate that we do have a kind of communal area, and my girlfriend likes to work out, so I've been doing some working out with her. Those that actually follow me on Instagram and on Facebook would have seen some quite ridiculous videos that have been sped up in ultra fast time, us doing lots of circuits. But even training with her, which is great because we both feed off each other, it's not the same as being in a competitive training environment that we usually find ourselves in. So I've actually, I think I mentioned this in last episode, when we gave a brief overview of kind of all the different things that go into being an athlete, and the things we touched on, a few different things. I think we tried to almost hit 7 points really, and we gave brief kind of ideas about things, but hence why I wanted to really hit psychology today, because it's been something that I've felt has hit me hard this week, and so I've been making a conscious effort to try and make that better. And so every morning now, and I'm so lucky that the weather is good, I've been going out on the balcony. So I get up straight away, chuck a tracksuit on, go and sit out on the balcony, and I do my Headspace app. Now, for those of you that don't know Headspace, it's basically an app that is designed to help you meditate effectively. It's a breathing exercise. Now, it's quite a developed Western version of meditation. And it's the idea of being present. So it's the idea of kind of bringing all your thoughts to the very here and now, the kind of central point, rather than allowing the mind to wander and drift and kind of dart everywhere. We often find that when we are going about any form of training, or even just day to day, most of the time we're thinking about what's going to happen next or what has happened. We're very rarely in the present. And actually, it's amazing sometimes how we look back at things and go, God, I really wish I enjoyed that more. I really wish I'd kind of been there. And so we're always thinking about the next thing, and that can become very tiring. And actually, it can make you quite anxious and stressed at times when there are competitions on the horizon, when there are tough training sessions on the horizon, or even like we're all kind of suffering from now, which is at times boredom, or lack of motivation. And so what I've been doing is trying to start the day in a very refreshed mindset. Now, I use the Headspace app right up until competition. I think it's really good to get that kind of breathing flow, to kind of collect your thoughts, be there in the present moment, and just allow yourself that little bit of space in the mind, as they kind of describe it. And that's been really beneficial. Kind of getting up in the morning, starting really fresh, and actually then going into training gives me a kind of renewed sense of purpose. I'm here, this situation, I can't change it. Everybody else is going through the same thing. And so I'm going to try and make the most of what I'm doing today, and really enjoy it. The weather's beautiful. I'm sat out on the balcony. I've got some fresh air, and I'm just focusing on my breathing and taking 10 minutes for myself. And I did that all the way up to the European champs last season. And it really, really helped me, especially in crucial times in the fights when, things started to either go really well or go really wrong. And when things go really well, you start thinking about the future. Oh my God, I'm going to win this fight. I'm going to move into the last 32, the last 16 of a World Cup. Isn't that amazing? Or if things start to go really badly, you start thinking, oh my God, if I lose, how bad is that going to be? I've worked so hard for this. I shouldn't be losing this early. I shouldn't be losing to this fencer. And your mind detracts from the very present and what you're doing. And so for me, I find this app exceptionally useful just to bring myself into the present. And now it's more crucial than any other time I'm finding.
Yeah, I think that's probably very true. And I find I've tried to do something similar myself, actually. So in my training program, every day I've scheduled a bit of mindfulness. So I don't actually use the Headspace app. I just set a timer for 5 minutes and find some music on YouTube. There are some kind of meditative music or sounds of the ocean or something. And I just press play and I sit there 5 minutes. I did start out using the Headspace app, but when I got to the end of the free trial, I stopped using it, and I just decided. But I also kind of stopped. It's quite interesting because I sort of stopped using it because it was the end of the free trial, and then I stopped doing it rather than continuing on my own. So I've had to make an effort to do that. But I've definitely found that when I do it, I feel much better. And this is a great time to set positive habits. And this is a positive habit because what it does is it teaches you to behave and think in a certain way about thoughts. Certain thoughts, there are no good or bad thoughts, but what you do with them. Like, nerves aren't a bad thing, but acknowledging them is important. If you try to shut them down and shove them away, then nothing positive comes from that. But if you kind of almost embrace it, if that makes sense, and kind of use it to your advantage, and that I find goes really well. And I think with mindfulness, and there are all sorts of different things out there. I'm not an expert on mindfulness and meditation and all the variants and what different people claim or ways of doing it, but something I've heard before that I found really helpful is the idea of blue sky. And that effectively what you're trying to do. So I start and you sort of do a scan of your body from top to toe, focus on your breathing, scan of your body, how's everything feeling today, and then you kind of let your mind wander a bit in the present, and you see what thoughts pop in, and each thought is effectively a cloud. And really what you're aiming for is to have blue sky with no clouds. But if clouds come in, that's okay. You kind of let them take their natural course, see where that goes. It might be kind of slightly more fear-based or slightly more excited, but by the end of it you'll feel better about it because they've taken their course, and you'll have probably learned something, or they'll have been dealt with and they'll have kind of disappeared on their own, and you might be left with blue sky. There might be days where you've got dark and stormy sky, but that I found that to be actually really helpful, and that's still how I approach that. And I found, as you said, it's at the moment it can be especially hard to stay motivated, and when you're feeling a bit funny, it's a really easy habit to fall out of, but it's only 5 minutes. It literally takes nothing. You don't even need to have music. If you want to sit in silence, that's fine as well. And even if your mind wanders to, I wonder how long has passed, that's okay as well, because you're still doing the exercise.
That it's the acceptance, isn't it? Which I think that's a really good kind of description of, as you say, the kind of allowing thoughts to just move through the mind rather than kind of dwelling on each one, because we all have emotions, and what you're describing there is the idea of kind of mindfulness, right? Which is the acceptance of things rather than trying to force emotions out. Like the one that I had with a psychologist once, which I thought was great, is he said, okay, Ben, do not think of a pink elephant. And obviously the first thing that pops into everybody's mind is pink elephant. And it sounds ridiculous, but the mind is there to constantly be active. It's there to constantly scan for things and have emotions. And so this idea of mindfulness, of just allowing the emotions to come in and to come out again, is the idea that you don't dwell on them and you don't fixate on them, and you just allow them to pass. It's okay to be nervous, and it's okay. And I saw something really great on Instagram at the moment, which is at the moment in time during lockdown, there's no right way to feel. people are,
Yeah,
and this
definitely.
was, I mentioned this to you earlier on, which I thought was really great, is that Patrick Jorgensen, who's an epee fencer now, he got a bronze medal at World Champs a few years back. Really lovely guy and a former foil fencer actually. He put an Instagram post up saying that he was feeling so unbelievably demotivated. This is a person that has won a bronze medal at World Champs. This is a highly decorated athlete, and they're feeling unbelievably demotivated. So much so that it was making him more demotivated actually looking at all of the things that people were doing on Instagram and Facebook, doing circuits, doing weight training, going for long runs, finding new challenges online, lots of different things. In actually for him, just getting over the hurdle of a couple of weeks and going for a very light jog was enough. That was a box ticked for him. That was, oh wow, I'm feeling so demotivated. The only thing I can bring myself to do, and for him, it was the lack of as we spoke about earlier on, which was the goal. There's no goal in sight, and so he's dealing with huge disappointment because right now there is no more World Cups, no more Grand Prix. You should be competing in Birmingham this weekend. We both should be competing at national champs in a few weeks, but we aren't. And so that disappointment that people are feeling from lack of competition means that you almost have a lack of direction, and therefore you feel really demotivated. And so right
Well, I
now,
think especially probably with like the Danish epee team at the moment are really kind of making strides. I don't know if he's part of that team, but whether or not he's part of the team in the current four-man team,
yeah,
he's
he is, yeah.
definitely been an influencer, and they're doing really well on the world circuit. They're kind of in the latter stages, and I think that's not somewhere that team has necessarily been in the past, and therefore they're part of something, they're building something, and it must feel really hard to be building something and have kind of feel like that's been yanked away at the moment. And I'm sure that with the cancellation, or I don't know if it's postponement or cancellation, but the obviously World Cups and Grand Prix, but also Junior Worlds, Junior and Cadet World, that's
Yeah.
probably something they're feeling as well, right? Because there's only a limited amount of time they can do that for. They've got age brackets they're limited to.
Yeah, completely. And actually, the head coach at our club, Dominique, she was saying the other day how a couple of the kids that she worked with are feeling unbelievably demotivated. One of whom was actually going to the World Championships, and very disappointed that he can't be out there. And there was a really good thing that came out, and that a couple of senior fencers were a part of, where there was just a post went out on Facebook and Instagram, and I think Dominique had actually had this idea. So just for the senior fencers, or for anybody really, just to kind of reach out to the cadets and juniors that had qualified for the World Champs of Salt Lake City, and just say, look, we know you're not competing, we know you're meant to be competing, but you know what? Amazing work on qualifying in the first place, and we can't wait to see you back on the piste and fencing again. And I think that was a really nice sentiment, because it was the fencing community is a small one, but it also needs to look after each other, especially in the UK. And I thought it was really nice that actually that idea had come about, and we were trying to help these young athletes still feel motivated, because the biggest competition that they had on the horizon was suddenly taken away from them. And actually, what we're seeing at the moment lots of Zoom sessions happening where kids are getting online and they're following coaches' advice, and direction, which is really good. But it will never replace, obviously, the actual personal contact of a coach, and
Of
taking
course.
lessons and all that kind of stuff. And so, as I said, there's no right way to feel at the moment, but there are things that you can do. So, like I mentioned, like Chris just spoke about, the idea of trying to help the mindset develop, help get some clarity in the head, because that will give you a springboard into being more motivated. Or whether being more motivated is just, actually, I'm going to go for a very light jog, or I'm going to have a stretching session, or is motivated, I'm going to run 6 kilometers, then I'm going to do a sprint session, then I'm going to do whatever it is. It would be good to start helping the psychology here, because everybody is feeling the same way. They're feeling flat, they're feeling despondent, because there's a lack of time scale. And so try and find some time in the week now to actually make room for that psychology. And you've made a great point the other day, Chris, is that we don't do enough psychology in fencing, do we?
No, we don't. I don't think we do at all, actually. I think it's something that's not really acknowledged as an area for improvement. I think we often kind of say, that person's weak-minded or that person's strong-minded. and that's the end of it. And it goes so much further. And actually, when you hear that somebody has a sports psychologist, you're really impressed, because firstly it means they're acknowledging something, and also it feels like they're kind of taking the extra step instead of that kind of just being a standardized part of the training. I know these sessions are expensive as well, so it's not there, nobody's going to take them for granted. There are other things that you can do, and I grew up around a lot of addiction and recovery from addiction in my family, and something that's definitely I think become a bit of an outlet. I've never kind of struggled with anything, but I think definitely for me, and I think lots of fencers I know, fencing is their addiction. It just so happens you can be good at it and it's kind of okay and you can move forwards with it, and it brings lots of positivity with it as well. But something that I've always heard that I found to be really helpful is you can't think to change a thought. You have to do something to change a thought. So as soon as if you're kind of feeling quite negative and things are spinning, kind of do something. It doesn't matter what you do. You could do the dishes, you go out, as you say, you go out for a run, or you kind of make a plan to do something, but you can't sit there dwelling on something to change a negative thought.
Absolutely.
And you've got to know, I say you've got to know yourself and know kind of where your limits are, but it's much harder for some people than others, no matter how well you might know yourself, but to be able to tick the boxes that you need to feel satisfied or feel better about something. I don't know if you've ever experienced.
Yeah, completely. It's about knowing yourself, and I think it's a great point you make. I think for me, I always thought when I was younger that psychology never really worked for me, and now I have a sports psychologist who I work with regularly, Jonathan, and he's brilliant, and people think the idea of sports psychology is sitting down there and talking about your childhood, and it's really not. Sports psychology is the better understanding of yourself and the way you react to kind of stressful situations. And actually, you'd be amazed how many people kind of react in similar ways. And so for me, I think what was really nice to see is that psychology is almost like a buffet, and you kind of have to make your own plate from that. You have to choose the parts of certain psychology that work. And I've done a lot of reading on psychology, and it's exhaustive and extensive. But that's a bit like any form of training. There are so many different bits out there. How do you kind of work out what's right for you? And unfortunately, sometimes it is just trial and error. And
when you say you've read quite a lot, this might be something that people are quite interested in. What kind of titles have you read, or anything that you found to be really helpful? So as you say, that you can pick and choose from your plate.
Yeah. So I read the book Mindfulness, which was really, really good. Really enjoyed that. And that's kind of a lot of the themes that I'm working on now, of the kind of, as we spoke about, the acceptance, the understanding that those emotions, you can't really change them. You just don't have to necessarily give them energy. You can just accept that they're there, but try and bring yourself to the present and deliver the action or things that you're doing at the time. And that's a bit like now feeling demotivated, but accepting you're feeling demotivated, understanding that everyone's in the same boat, and try and find a way to do what's right for you in the current situation. I've also read The Chimp Paradox, which was brilliant. That was really, really good. That was written by Dr. Stephen Peters, who actually was the sports psych coach for Victoria Pendleton and Ronnie O'Sullivan. So a top snooker player and Olympic gold medalist from Beijing in cycling. Brilliant. He just describes the kind of the brain as you have your chimp, which is the emotions, which wants to be very animalistic and run riot, and then you have the computer, which is the kind of logical analytical part of the brain, and then inside the computer, which is the logical analytical part of the brain, you might have some gremlins that you need to, which are habits that you can effectively train out of you, like you can with any form of training. And then understanding that sometimes the chimp will run riot, sometimes it will get out of its cage and it's going to go a bit mental, and that you just have to find coping mechanisms or ways to hopefully engage with that emotion so that it doesn't become a behavior. Because we've all found that if when we're in stressful situations, we revert to things that are bad habits, that's a big emotional response. Whereas actually, if you're able to understand that you're feeling stressed but still able to deliver some of the new actions or the new things that you're working on with your coach, actually you have a higher likelihood of winning. But yet that's such a detrimental way of thinking to yourself at the
absolutely.
time, because you're like, oh no, I'm going to stick to what I know and I feel safe with. So there's those kind of things. I think those books are really good. And one,
can I just say something on that quickly?
Yeah,
I think
of course.
a behavior on that I think every single fencer can relate to is wanting to blame the ref or have a go at the ref, or saying, The ref didn't see this, so, I was refed out of that fight. And actually, there can be a degree of truth to that, but there's only so much that referee can do. You are the one in control of your own actions, and sometimes emotions can take over in those moments. And you can look for an outlet and want to blame. I know we've done this in lessons before, actually, where you've really pushed me to the edge. You've really pushed me to when I'm really tired and you want more out of me. And, I've had moments where I really wanted to tell you to piss off. But that was your aim. You wanted to get to that point. Sure. And then kind of execute stuff, because that's going to happen in matches. And I found as well, it happened a few years ago to me at Nationals, actually. I lost 4 fights all day, which, it sounds like is quite a lot. But, I had 5 pool fights. I won 2 and I lost 3, 5-4, 5-4, 5-4. And then I lost my last 64 fight. I was by far the lowest seed. I was leading and I lost 15-14. So my losses that day were 5-4, 5-4, 5-4, 15-14.
Stressful
which
day.
Really, really sucked. And in those moments, in each one of those, it felt like things were building up a bit more. And I was starting, and I was kind of at the same time as blaming the referee, saying I'm not good enough. So you're at the same time saying I'm so good, I shouldn't be losing to this person, and at the same time I'm not losing. I'm not good enough. But
there's a big internal battle there, isn't there?
Yeah, sometimes. Definitely. But there are things, there are definitely, even though it sucked at the time, I took a lot away from that. And one of the things is, to be a cool mofo and kind of let things slide off. Like water off a duck's back. Don't let anything get in. And you just kind of hold your head up high every time, and you just have to know that stuff starts and ends with you. No matter what's going on. You could be smashing someone, you could be losing awfully, but actually kind of being a good sportsman and being kind of on the humbler side really serves you better. That doesn't mean humble as in, you're going to get every hit, but it just kind of means being in control, which is much easier said than done. But as I understand it,
it talks about your stone of life, which is like your key values and what are important to you. And it actually talks about how that when those key values are challenged, for example, a big value for me is fairness. And if the referee gives a hit the wrong way, I feel very hard done by. I feel like I haven't been treated fairly. And so you get an emotional response there. So we know that when our core values are challenged, we can sometimes get a very emotional response. But understanding that we can still demonstrate our core values, and actually by people not demonstrating that around us doesn't directly affect us, but we can obviously directly affect how we treat our core values, and things like that. There was an amazing, again, just going back to Epe, there was an amazing, I can't remember who the fences were or where it was, but it was a hit that I saw, and it might have been at World Champs, and a fencer went for a hit as they were like, I think, flashing off the piece. They missed, and their blade caught the floor on the way through. Even though it was a metal piece, they were flashing. They caught the floor on the way through, and actually they acknowledged that they hadn't scored the touch. And it was an amazing moment, a display of sportsmanship. And that person was obviously clearly displaying what to them was a core value, which is fairness. I'm not going to win this by just, taking that hit for no reason. Don't get it wrong. I mean, we've all got the lucky rub of the draw sometimes when it comes to a refereeing call, which is great. But also there's an understanding of what is important to us. And as you say, trying to be on the piece and deliver your best performance in the way that you want to deliver that and the way you want to be seen is also crucial. But going back to what you were saying about being pushed, both of my coaches, both Graham and Pavel, pushed me physically very hard, because at the limit is where you kind of learn the most about yourself.
Yeah, I've always thought that.
Crass way of talking about it. So yeah, at the moments when it really, really hurts, that's when you kind of psychologically you're feeling it as well. And so actually sometimes when you watch athletes competing, we as part of the team, we spoke about when we were competing in Cairo, is making the phrases as long as possible, because not only are you physically exhausting your opponent, but they're like, oh God, when will this end? When will I be able to deliver my touch? This person just keeps soaking up every action, and we're going for another length. And the more kind of exhausted you can make them, the more mentally exhausted they are as well, and more likely they are to eventually break before you do. That's hugely important, how physical and psychologically are both kind of intrinsically linked, which was worked really well for our team in Cairo, that's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. There was one book, which is possibly the only book I've actually read about sports psychology, is called Winning Ugly, by Brad Gilbert. Really tennis book, but I think fencers kind of throw it around a bit because it was quite good. I read it and I made notes. But what you're describing is one of the first examples that he lists of a type of player, which is the returner, which is a tennis player that basically sits on the back line. Think of like Murray or Djokovic, that sit on the back line really well, and like no matter what you get over the net, their ball just keeps coming back at you.
Like
Doesn't matter. It's like a wall, and it's really demotivating. And we've spoken about
break them.
You can't break them. You can't break them, and you're like, when is this ever going to end? And then you open up. There becomes a chink in your armor, and then they get through and they win that point, and you're like, oh man. And you don't know how it happened, but you know that it really drained you. And they're prepared to battle for every single point. It doesn't matter. They're not trying to do anything necessarily other than keep it alive and keep the ball in play.
And I think you're hugely right there. And actually, what we're all experiencing right now in lockdown is people are demotivated, people are struggling. But let's not make any bones about it. Trying to win a fight at a high level in high intensity doesn't feel nice. There's no kind of, oh, this feels really good. Even when you're in the zone, which is, I always hate using that word, but when things are very focused and very sharp focus in your thinking, it's when you're at your most in your present. I like to use that word present quite a lot. When you really are focused on every touch and what you're trying to achieve for every millisecond of that fight. That's what I like to think of as the kind of really utopia state you find yourself in. Even then, it's hard work, both physically and mentally. Mentally, it takes a lot of stamina as well. And that's what I like about the headspace stuff, is that with the breathing, it requires you to really focus and not let the mind wander. When we do the breathing, like you spoke about, when you're sitting there thinking, how many times does your mind wander, and how many times do you have to not get frustrated at yourself because it has wandered, but actually just accept that and just try and come back to the present. It's hugely frustrating at times when you can constantly see your mind wandering, and that's about kind of mental stamina as well. So this builds up that kind of focus, a focused attention, which is really important to fencing, because at any time the mind can start to wonder about, oh, if I win this and that kind of stuff, like we spoke about earlier on. But I think for anybody that's kind of listening at the moment, there is no right way to feel right now. It is tough. It is 3 weeks in. Everybody felt, oh, this was quite new and interesting and kind of fun to start with. But now we're getting into it. You have to realize that Wuhan's come out of lockdown after being in it for 11 weeks. Now, if we're going to be anything similar to that, we've got potentially 3.5 times the amount of time that we've been in lockdown for still to come. That's without long-term goals. That's probably without mid-term goals. Right now, like we spoke about last episode, be curious, adapt, enjoy it, overcome certain things. But if you're feeling demotivated, if psychologically you're struggling, get on Amazon and read some books on psychology. Understand it, because information is power. And if you really get the game, if you get how your brain works, you start to understand yourself better. You can understand how to make this just a little bit more comfortable, or become comfortable with the uncomfortable, because that's going to translate onto the piste the minute you step outside the house and you get back into training again. Be armed with new information, new understanding about yourself, to be able to take that into your training. This can be trained every day, whether it's me going out on the balcony and doing headspace and some breathing, to Chris sitting down, listening to relaxing, calming music and just taking 5 minutes for himself, to sitting there reading a great book like Winning Ugly or Chimp Paradox or Mindfulness. At the moment, I'm reading a book called Habit, and it's about understanding how habits are made and they're broken. And right now, build new habits, build new ways of thinking and adapting to situations, because it's only going to translate into the bigger stage once we move away from all of this. And at the moment in time, British Fencing have got a really good thing they're doing. They've put out on their homepage about, if you are struggling to be motivated, there are lots of points of contact that you can use, because this isn't supposed to be comfortable for anybody. There's no way of thinking right now. And psychology is so important, and it's such a key cornerstone to fencing and to any form of training, that actually you start to get that right, you'll see your game change overnight.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there are more things. One of my favorite quotes is talking about how there are known knowns, known unknowns, and unknown unknowns, and you can break pretty much everything down into those categories. I actually got that at uni. I did design at uni. It was one of the things kind of about production processes and things. And one of our known knowns at the moment is that we're in lockdown, and we know what our training is like. Our known unknown. Okay, so we know at some point it will end, but we don't know when, which kind of makes things hard to plan. An unknown unknown is things might come out of the blue. It might go on for considerably longer than we think it could. We might be affected by it in some way. We might catch this virus or something else. And one of the things that's quite good is competitions have been postponed and cancelled, which takes the pressure off, which is quite good. It means that we're not necessarily losing ground to anyone, but we have the time to kind of focus on ourselves. And looping what you were saying background to refereeing again is fairness and having things within our control. How many times at the end of a competition have you sat there and gone, I'm really pleased with all the refereeing today? We're never going to entirely agree with everybody that we've had, or there's just no way, because refereeing is subjective to a degree, and what we do is subjective because we're behind the mask and we feel a certain way, even if it did or didn't look how we think it did. So again, kind of to do with fairness, all we can really do is control the controllables and step back and be kind of, you mentioned this before, but be our kind of rock in the ocean. If we're a rock in the ocean, there are waves coming around us. If you stand fast and you're solid, you're never going to be drowned. And I think, the kind of the chimp taking over is the same as, the water covering the rock and not being able to breathe or kind of stand up or anything. And I find that really helpful. I think lots of people can have their own kind of metaphors for what this looks and feels like, but definitely reading some books would go a long way, no matter what level you fence at, because those feelings are the same. I imagine, I've only ever been to one World Cup, but those feelings are the same whether or not you fence at the top level or kind of medium level or regionally, or kind of, you're trying to qualify for the GB Cup or qualify for the GB team, or trying to qualify for the Olympics. You those feelings, the emotions are all the same, because it's a bit of a roller coaster. And I found so far the further you go, the more there is that unravels and you realize there is to learn. But all you can do is really kind of control what you're going to do. And like you've done before, you've been doing your whole life actually, is you didn't suddenly become much better at fencing. You've put the work in it along the line, and you've identified points and you said, right, this is within my control, this is within my control, and my head is within my control. And psychology is definitely something that comes out of that, and probably the biggest factor, because I've heard people talk about positivity, and one of the coaches at a club I go to, South Boston, once told me about how he went to see his sports psychologist, and the first thing he was asked is, right, imagine you're taking a parry. Okay, great. How good is your parry? And the answer was 7. I'm like, why is it 7? This is in your head. It should be 10. It should be as good as it can be.
That's very true.
And again, those things are within your control. You have the power to imagine the positives. You have the power to have headspace and remove yourself from a situation, or commit to a certain training program, or commit to less if that works better for you, and you find yourself overwhelmed by this, or as you said, you're feeling really unmotivated and negative about everything that's going on at the moment. You've got to do what works for you.
Completely. And you know what, I was once at a World Cup and I was 14-10 up, and I went, yes, I'm gonna nail this, I'm gonna absolutely smash this, this is gonna be great. And then I lost 15-14. And from that day on, I vowed that I would make sure that I would never think about the future in fencing again. And
only a few months ago, not quite similar, but it was at the London Cup, actually. It was in the last 1-2-8, and I knew what 64 would mean for me in my ranking.
Yeah.
And I think I was down for most of the fight. I think I was kind of 11-8 down or 12-8 down or something.
Yeah.
I leveled it at 12-all. You happened to be there that day, coaching more of your pupils as well. So I'm really glad, because you were there and you saw. And then I got to 14-12, and my mindset went to, okay, one more. And I said it out loud, and you were there on the side of the piece going, no, not one more, the next one.
yeah, exactly. And not one more. It's all these little things we put in our brain. And you know what? Time and time again, I had to retrain myself, relearn the similar thought patterns, the correct thought patterns. And it's hard, but it's enjoyable, and you can do it right now while we've got all this extra time. I think that kind of like brings us to a quite a nice conclusion there. And we really hope you enjoyed this episode and got something out of it. And hopefully it's made you feel a little bit more stable, that not just you are potentially feeling demotivated. And if you are feeling motivated, great, excellent. Then we refer you back to episode 1, when there's a lot of things to get on with. We were looking at potentially for episode 3 talking about kind of tactical analysis and how that can be implemented into your technical training. So we're going to try and do, I think, an episode a week, Chris. So is that right?
We're going to aim to do an episode a week covering a variety of topics, but also if there are things that people want to hear about more, and we can prioritize those. So get in touch on Twitter or on Reddit, or in touch with either one of us if you know us. We'd love to hear from you, and we definitely want feedback, and we've implemented some of that feedback in this episode already, so it definitely goes somewhere.
Yeah, for sure. Get in contact. You can either do that on Twitter and the Fenced In podcast, or obviously subscribe on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. And as Chris said, you can get in contact with either of us, whether you know us or not. If you've got Instagram or Facebook, you can find me. I've got my Ben Peggs fencing page, or Ben Peggs on Instagram. And if you know Chris, drop him a message, drop him an email, and we'll try and implement some of those things that you guys want to hear, because ultimately this is about giving you information to help you whilst you're in quarantine and in lockdown. So really hope you enjoyed this episode, and we look forward to making our third one.
Yeah, definitely. Can't wait. It's been great, and thank you to everyone that's been so positive on something that we were trying out and wanted to be able to help with. So that's been great. Thanks everyone so much for listening. Make sure to review, subscribe, and rate us on whatever platform, and we'll speak to you soon.
Cool. See you later, guys.